Did you know that the average person wastes 22 hours every week? That's almost 3 full workdays. Today, I'm going to show you 3 evidence-based methods to have the most productive week of your entire life. Methods that will help you get more done in 7 days than most people do in an entire month. First, we're going to talk about weekly reviews and forward planning. The brain is a fascinating thing. It's constantly working to keep track of everything you need to do, even when you're not actively thinking about it. Scientists did this cool study where they observed how restaurant waiters could remember complex orders perfectly until the food was served. Then they instantly forgot them. That's called the Zeigarnik effect, and it explains why unfinished tasks keep nagging at your mind.
Think of your mental energy like this tank. Without weekly reviews, what we call open loops consume your energy like background apps draining your phone's battery. 10% of your energy goes to this loop, 10% goes to this loop, and soon you're running on completely empty. But when you do weekly reviews, you get to close these loops so that they're no longer energy drains on your schedule and also your life.
This isn't just about feeling organized. It actually changes how your brain works. When you take control of your week through planning, you activate what psychologists call your internal locus of control. Your belief that you can influence outcomes. It's like being the pilot of your life instead of just a passenger.
Imagine flying a plane and this dotted line represents the route that you need to take to get to your destination. If your plane even veers off 1 degree, then look at what happens to your path. And ultimately, this is the analogy that we can take for what happens when you don't course correct and review and reflect on your week. So in the beginning, it's just 1 degree off, and ultimately the distance isn't that far. But then as time goes on, if you notice, 1 degree represents such a big separation into where you wanted to be and where you actually ended up. If you're able to nip this in the bud and course correct before it even gets to this point, then what you're able to do is have a path that looks more like this. So maybe you're 1 degree off, but then it's like, oh, wait, let me course correct. And then you're 1 degree off, and it's like, wait, let me course correct. This is a big reason why weekly reviews are so important, because they help you review everything being done that is in service to your goals and your ambitions and what you're trying to build for your life.
Here's how to make your weekly reviews actually work. First, review your past week. Ask yourself, what moved the needle forward? Where did you spend time without getting proportionate results? What challenges came up and how did you handle them? Then look at what you didn't get finished. Were your time estimates realistic? Did priorities shift? Should these tasks move forward or completely be reevaluated? Next, identify your 3 or 4 major priorities for your coming week. But here's the key. Don't just list them. Define exactly what done looks like for each task and break them down into specific steps and find any dependencies to complete those steps. Next is to think about strategic time blocking. This isn't where you just fill your calendar with tasks. It's where you block your deepest work first, then fit other tasks around it. Think of it like packing a suitcase. Put the big items in first, then fill the gaps with smaller ones. Method number 2. Parkinson's law states that work expands to fill the time available for its completion. That's just a fancy way to say we take as long as the time we're given to do something. Think about the last time you had to clean your room. If you gave yourself an entire day, it somehow took all day. But if you had guests coming in 30 minutes, you'd get it done in that short period of time. But Parkinson's law isn't just about procrastination. It's about how our brains fundamentally approach tasks when given time constraints. Let me explain. What's actually happening to your mind when you have too much time for a task?
First, your brain enters what psychologists call exploratory mode. Let's look at 2 different situations. Situation A and situation B. Imagine for situation A, you have 5 minutes to write an email, and situation B, you have 30 minutes. Let's look at what each one of those paths look like. In situation A, because you have the time constraint of 5 minutes, this is what it would look like from start to finish. This is you, and this is you finishing the email. It's a pretty straight line from you writing the email and you sending it and completing it. There are distractions along the way, but because you have a time constraint, you're less likely to get distracted by everything that comes up that could steal your attention. But here's the interesting thing. If you have 30 minutes, here's a little bit more of what that path looks like. So you're trying to write the email, but then wait, you get distracted by distraction number 1. And then you finish that and you come back on path. And then wait, you get distracted by distraction number 2. And then you come here and then, oh, there's another distraction. And then by the time you finish, that's where 30 minutes have went, as where in example A, it could have been 5 minutes. The ability to narrow your focus on what is important is such a big part of why giving yourself a time constraint is so important, because you only focus on what matters and not on what doesn't.
But here's where it gets really interesting. When we have too much time, 3 psychological things are happening in our brain. The first is analysis paralysis. Your brain gets overwhelmed by too many options. It's like walking into a store with 100 different types of breakfast cereal. More choice often leads to worse decisions, not better ones. The second is what psychologists call perfectionism creep. With time pressure, your standards gradually just get way higher. And that may sound like a good thing, but this simple thing that's happening in your brain actually turns tasks that could be done in a short period of time into a behemoth of a project that you didn't even know you signed up for. Everything that you're adding when you're making a task more complex usually actually isn't even important. The third is scope inflation. This is when tasks mysteriously grow new requirements and subtasks. That website redesign project suddenly needs a complete rebranding exercise. That quick code update becomes a full system overhaul. Your brain literally creates more work just to fill that time block. Here's the thing. Scientists have found that moderate time pressure triggers the ability for our brain to focus better. Think about it like this. When a lion is chasing you, your brain doesn't waste time wondering which direction to run. It instantly assesses and acts on the best available option. While that's an extreme example, the same mental machinery kicks in whenever you have a deadline. Your brain enters what's called exploitative mode, using the best available solutions rather than searching for perfect ones. This is why we often do our best work under slight time pressure. It's not just about motivation, it's about our brain operating in its most efficient mode. The key is finding the sweet spot, enough time pressure to trigger focus without panic.
So how do we harness this principle without waiting for last minute pressure? This is where strategic time boxing comes in. Instead of giving yourself loose deadlines, create artificial constraints that trigger your brain's efficient mode. For instance, most people block out their calendar like this. From 1 p.m. to 6 p.m., they'll time block this and they'll say, make content. A more efficient way to strategically time box is like this: 1 p.m., 6 p.m. And rather than have something vague that says just make content, you can do, okay, so let's do 30 minutes of outlining, and then these 2 hours are going to be 2 hours of scripting, and then for this 3.3 hours of review. You see how this one is so much more vague, and this one actually creates a time constraint within the time constraint? This is so much more effective at getting something done and getting it done efficiently.
Your brain responds to these mini deadlines just like real ones, giving you the benefits of time pressure without the stress of actual last minute work. Think of it like interval training for your mind. Short, intense periods of focused work that keeps you operating at your peak. Now let's talk about method number 3. This is what I believe is the most unappreciated aspect of productivity. It's called energy management. Everyone talks about time management, but no one ever talks about the fact that you actually can't manage time. Time moves forward regardless, whatever you do. But what you can manage is your energy. So let me share a discovery that transformed how I think about energy management, and hopefully this could help you. So in the 1950s, researchers found something fascinating about the brain. It found that unlike machines that work continuously at the same level, our brain operates in cycles. They're what's called ultradian rhythms. They're periods of high and low energy, and each cycle lasts, I think, 90 to 120 minutes. Think about your own experience for a moment. Have you ever noticed how some mornings you can focus intensely for about an hour and a half, and then suddenly you find yourself getting distracted, maybe craving a coffee break or a gym break? That's not a lack of willpower. It's your brain following its natural rhythm. You're experiencing what performance researchers call the basic rest activity cycle. Here's what's happening in your brain during those cycles. During the peak phase, your brain produces high levels of attention chemicals like dopamine and norepinephrine. I totally butchered that, by the way. Your working memory is stronger, your decision making is sharper, and your focus is at its maximum. But consider something interesting. After that time of intense focus, your brain starts to downshift. Stress hormones like cortisol begin to rise and your attention chemicals start to decline. This isn't a flaw in your productivity, it's a feature of your biology. Your brain is telling you it needs a period of rest, and most people try to fight these natural dips with caffeine or willpower. But here's the crazy thing. If you work in tandem with these rhythms versus against them, it can actually be a 40% improvement in your productivity. Research shows that most people have about 4 to 6 hours of peak cognitive performance each day. For about 75% of people, these peak hours occur in the morning. Some people, particularly night owls, experience their peak later in the day. The key is identifying your own pattern. But here's where it gets really interesting. Different types of work require different types of energy, and understanding this can transform how you structure your day. Let's break it down. Strategic work is work like analyzing a complex problem, making an important decision, or creative thinking. It requires your highest level of cognitive energy. This is when your brain is operating at full capacity. During these periods, you can think more clearly and make better decisions. The next is administrative work, like responding to routine emails or organizing files, updating schedules. This can be done with pretty moderate energy levels. It requires less cognitive horsepower, so it's not as demanding to your brain. Lastly, we have what's called routine work, such as data filing, organizing folders onto your computer. This can pretty much be done when you're at your lowest energy level because it doesn't really require much horsepower. But here's the key insight that most people miss. Energy management isn't just about matching tasks to energy levels. It's about strategically using your energy to create more energy. Think of it like a financial investment. When you invest your peak energy in important work, you get a return on that investment through accomplishment and progress, which in turn energizes you further. So how do you implement this in practice? Well, start by creating an energy map of your day, and for 1 week, track your energy levels through every hour on a scale of 1 to 10. Look for patterns. When do you feel most alert? When do you feel that alertness fade? Once you understand your own pattern, that's when you can start to categorize your tasks by energy requirement, not just importance. Many people make the mistake of working on important tasks when their energy is low, simply because that's when they have time. Instead, I would challenge you to align your most important work with your peak energy period. Here's a practical example. If you're a morning person, your day might look like this. From 8 to 10, that's when you have peak energy. So this is when you do your strategic planning, creative work, make important decisions. From 10 to 11, this is when you have high energy. So, you think about complex problem solving, do some detailed analysis. From 11 to 12, it's kind of moderate. So you save this time period for meetings. For 1 to 5, maybe this is when you start to downshift in your energy levels and you start to just fill it with maybe admin tasks or things that you could do pretty much whether you were tired or not. By creating tight time boxes during your peak energy periods, you can maximize both your natural energy and your focus. It's like creating a perfect storm of productivity. Your brain is at its best in operating in its most efficient mode. If you implement these three evidence-based productivity methods, you'll find that you start to get more done in a week than other people get done in a whole year.